everyone, I'm Mr. Berg, your virtual video teacher, coming at you from my bedroom, and today we're going to be having a virtual video lesson. Today we're going to be talking about the Hellenistic Era, and more specifically, the arts, the minds, and the science that were a part of it. Before we dive headlong into this lesson, let's review a little bit. First, the word Hellenistic means like the Greeks. The era itself was given this name because it symbolized a time where Greek culture was spreading throughout the world. And I get it, you're probably wondering, how did they do this? Alexander the Great's armies extended Greek rule over a very large region. This spreading resulted in Greek languages, ideas, and architecture to be spread throughout Southwest Asia and Egypt. At the same time, Alexander sought to unite Macedonia, the Greeks, the Egyptians, and Asians under his new empire. However, Alexander's dream would be short-lived. He died and his generals divided his empire into 4 kingdoms, those that would be Macedonia, Pergamum, Egypt, and Seleucid. These new Hellenistic kings, or Greek-like kings, expected their people to speak Greek and gave special treatment to those who were Greek or Macedonian. This was a tactic for them to keep the Greeks in power, so that their reign could be passed down to more people that had views like them. Furthermore, these Hellenistic kings would create new cities and military posts, and these new places would produce a new need for Greek architects, artists, and engineers. These kings wanted Greek culture to be a part of Greek expansion, and this expansion in turn would spread Greek culture further and further. Now let's move into the Hellenistic arts. The Hellenistic era saw the movement of philosophers, scientists, poets, and writers to new Greek cities of Southwest Asia and Egypt. One such example of these cities was the Greek capital of Alexandria in Egypt. Alexandria served as a major center of learning, boasting an impressive library that contained over 500,000 scrolls and a museum where much famous research would be conducted. To this day, Alexandria is still a vital city in Egypt with over 4 million people living and working there. As mentioned before, architecture played an important role in Hellenistic culture and in expanding Alexander's empire. The Hellenistic kings wanted their new cities to resemble Greek cities like Athens and other cultural centers of Greece. These kings, alongside other wealthy citizens, hired Greek sculptors that would create thousands of statues for many different towns and cities. It's worth noting that these sculptures were very different from those of Greece's Golden Age, because they depicted people in a more realistic style. These statues expressed emotions like sadness and anger. Hellenistic rulers also supported talented writers. The support would result in a large amount of literature during the Hellenistic era being developed. Sadly, very little of this writing has survived to today. However, one such poem, called Argonauta of Rhodes, written by a man named Apollonius, is still alive today.
Hercules, the strongest man alive with a mighty heart to match. Orpheus, charmer of nature and master of music. Castor and Pollux, the twin tricksters hatched from an egg. The Boreads, sons of the north wind who could hurtle through the air. For untold times, these heroes had roamed ancient Greece, creating new legends wherever they went. But none of their adventures was so great as when they joined forces for the sake of a young man named Jason. Years before, Jason's uncle Peleus had ruthlessly usurped the throne of Thessaly from Jason's grandfather. When Jason returned to his father's stolen court, the cowardly king set him a seemingly impossible task: cross the teeming seas to Colchis and steal the golden fleece of a flying ram under King Aietes' nose. If Jason retrieved the fleece, Peleus promised to relinquish the throne. Touched by his heroic mission, the gods spread Jason's call for help, and soon he had assembled a not-so-motley crew. These heroes, alongside countless sailors, soothsayers, and rebel demigods, named themselves the Argonauts after their sturdy ship. But the path ahead was marked with untold terrors, enough to test even the fiercest heroes.
As you can see, the poem tells the story of Jason and his band of heroes sailing the seas seeking a ram with golden fleece. Along the way, their journey would result in many different adventures. Today, modern versions of this story are given the name Jason and the Argonauts, and I'm sure some of you have probably heard of it before. Okay, I don't think Hellenistic theater was that bad, but it was a good transition. The art of theater still played a big role in the Hellenistic era, and Athens, like it did in Greece's Golden Age, remained the center of Greek theater. Writers of this time produced comedies instead of tragedies, known as Greek New Comedy. Instead of poking fun at political leaders, these plays told stories of love and relationship featuring regular people. A man named Menander was the best-known playwright of the Hellenistic era. His work would become very influential in the development of European comedy later during the Renaissance period of history. During his lifetime, he would write 108 comedies and win 8 Greek festival prizes. That's a lot of comedies. So, due to the support of the Hellenistic kings and rulers, Hellenistic art was able to flourish at a large level. Art created during this era is still looked upon and celebrated today and throughout history, which should kind of tell you the importance of it. Very important ideas and minds would emerge during the Hellenistic era, and one such mind was a Greek philosopher named Epicurus. Epicurus would found the philosophy of Epicureanism. He believed finding happiness was the goal of life, and to be happy, you had to avoid pain. I don't know about you, but I'm usually happy when I'm not in pain, so maybe this guy was onto something. Epicureans, followers of Epicureanism, avoided worry, limiting their wants, and lived simply. Pleasure to them meant spending time with friends. Zeno was another famous philosopher of the time, who developed the philosophy of Stoicism. Stoics, followers of Stoicism, claimed that people who were guided by their emotions lived unhappy. To them, happiness could be found from using reason. Unlike Epicureans, Stoics thought people had a duty to serve the community. Epicureans were more so about avoiding worry, and community kind of was worrisome. So, take a moment. Imagine you lived during this time. Would you be Team Epicureans or Team Stoics? Let me know the next time you see me. Arguably, the most important thing to come from the Hellenistic era was the contributions made by the scientists of the time for the world. And so, to break them down, we're going to play a game called Who's That Notable Hellenistic Scientist? Sorry, we're working on the name. Notable scientist number 1 was Aristarchus. He claimed that the sun was the center of the universe, and the earth circled the sun. Other astronomers of the time obviously rejected his ideas. They thought the earth was the center of the universe, and for people who had never been off the planet, it kind of made sense. You would think everything revolves around you. A lot of people act that way to begin with. We know today that Aristarchus was correct in his claims, and it's been proven since. Our next notable scientist served as chief librarian in the Library of Alexandria and was named Eratosthenes. I'm trying, people. He concluded that Earth was round and was able to conclude this by measuring the Earth's circumference. I get you're probably thinking, Mr. Berg, there's no way some Greek scientist measured the Earth's circumference. Well, I'll explain how he did it.
In the mid-20th century, we began launching satellites into space that would help us determine the exact circumference of the Earth, 40,030 kilometers. But over 2,000 years earlier in ancient Greece, a man arrived at nearly that exact same figure by putting a stick in the ground. That man was Eratosthenes, a Greek mathematician and the head of the Library of Alexandria. Eratosthenes had heard that in Syene, a city to the south of Alexandria, no vertical shadows were cast at noon on the summer solstice. The sun was directly overhead. He wondered if this were also true in Alexandria, so on June 21st he planted a stick vertically in the ground and waited to see if a shadow would be cast at noon. It turns out there was one, and it measured about 7 degrees. Now, if the sun's rays are coming in at the same angle at the same time of day, and a stick in Alexandria is casting a shadow while a stick in Syene is not, it must mean that the Earth's surface is curved.
For all my flat earthers out there, this information may be hard for you to grasp, but we care about you and are here for you. It's okay. Notable scientist number 3 is none other than the father of geometry himself, Euclid. Euclid describes something called plane geometry. Plane geometry shows how points, lines, angles, and surfaces relate to one another. He would describe and explain all of this in his now famous book, Elements. Last and most definitely not least of the notable scientists is Archimedes. Considered to be the most famous scientist of the Hellenistic era, Archimedes was a mathematician, physicist, engineer, inventor, and astronomer. He studied ball-like shapes that we call spheres and tube-like shapes that we call cylinders, and by doing so he was able to find the value of pi. And no, not the kind that you eat, sadly. He also developed machinery and weapons of war such as the catapult and lever, heat ray, and the Archimedes screw. He was a pretty impressive guy.
The spiral pattern around the trunk of the tree resembles the shape of a screw. The kind of screw used for drawing water uphill. Silent and able to keep a constant amount of water flowing against gravity, it would have been an engineering breakthrough. Sennacherib was using the shape of a date palm to describe an Archimedes screw.
So let's now bring a close to this lesson and the Hellenistic era. The 4 kingdoms that formed from Alexander's empire shared and spread Hellenistic culture throughout the conquered lands. However, these kingdoms were never really able to get along and work together. Furthermore, they often fought wars among each other. Meanwhile, during this entire time, the rise of Rome was coming about. So by the late 200s BC, Rome would begin what we call a takeover. First, they would conquer the entire Italian peninsula, and then would go on to gain control of the entire Greek mainland. But that's history for another time, and we'll touch on it. Finally, I'd like to give some reminders. Pay attention to the names of historic people of the Hellenistic era. Understand who they were and what they contributed in their areas. Understand how culture spread and what people or forces allowed the spread of culture to happen. Finally, understanding the difference between Stoic and Epicurean views is important, so you should do your best to be able to discern what makes them different. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'm Mr. Berg, your virtual video lesson teacher, and I'll be seeing you guys around. Peace.